The liberation struggle is said to have begun as soon as the first Europeans set foot on African soil, more than 500 years ago. The indigenous Kwekwe inhabitants repelled the Portuguese invasion in 1510 and, more than 100 years later, stood up to the Dutch colonists in the 1650s. Subsequently, the British occupiers were challenged in a series of frontier wars with the Xhosa nation between 1779 and 1879. At the same time, the Zulu nation resisted incursions by both the migrating Voortrekkers and by the British between the 1830s and the 1880s. More recently, the 20th century saw a number of resistance efforts against European conquest and domination. The first phase of the liberation quest was marked by diplomatic engagement and petitioning for support. Attempts to legislate discrimination against those of Asian origin in 1906 led to a campaign of passive resistance fronted by Mahatma Gandhi. Then, in 1913, black South Africans were threatened with eviction from their land. In response, delegations from the fledgling South African Native National Congress visited London several times to request assistance from the British government. Several times, the British refused to intervene. Nevertheless, the diplomatic stance gave rise to a lasting global solidarity movement in support of the struggle. The ascendance to power in 1948 of the repressive National Party led to a second prong of the liberation campaign: direct confrontation and disobedience. A widespread defiance campaign encouraged the deliberate violation of unjust laws. An alternative future for the country was mapped out in the Freedom Charter, which was adopted in 1955. The following year, 20,000 women of all races from across the country marched in protest on Pretoria's Union buildings. But 156 leaders connected to the Freedom Charter were arrested, and the 5-year-long treason trial began. The Sharpeville Massacre of March 1960 introduced the phase of armed struggle, beginning with the banning of political organizations, which continued to operate from exile. At the Rivonia trial in 1964, Nelson Mandela and his comrades were sentenced to life imprisonment, and the armed struggle became punctuated by acts of sabotage, with military retaliation being carried out in neighboring states. In 1976, a student uprising on June 16 was violently put down, with 176 children being killed on that day alone, and at least 600 in subsequent brutal retaliations. South Africa was progressively subjected to international economic sanctions and was increasingly isolated by cultural and academic boycotts. The ANC's cultural desk vetted any proposed cultural or academic engagement. The geopolitical landscape shifted at the end of the Cold War, and South Africa's period of transition began with the unbanning of the liberation movements and the release from prison, after 27 years, of future President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. The Congress for a Democratic South Africa, CODESA, began sitting in December 1991 against a backdrop of continuing conflict. Efforts by fascist militants to sabotage proceedings and the assassination of a leading liberation figure, Martin Tembisile Chris Hani. Despite setbacks, peace negotiations continued, paving the way towards the first democratic elections in April 1994. Nelson Mandela was sworn in as the first democratic president, and a multi-party constitutional assembly began to draft the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, which was promulgated 2 years later. To facilitate a process of healing, the Government of National Unity established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, to investigate violence and human rights abuses committed on all sides during the apartheid era.